DJ Nation fam, what is up? What is happening? Back again for the Week 14 TFA DFS top low owned plays here by yours truly, Ryan Williams. You can find me on Twitter at RyanAlexander_W. And I'm not going to waste any time. I just want to let you know, subscribe to the YouTube channel, guys. If this is the only content that you guys consume and you haven't heard about it, we are doing a giveaway through the Fantasy Authority here on December 27th. If you subscribe to the channel, you will qualify to enter or to be eligible to win Allen Robinson signed jersey from the Fantasy Authority. How cool is that? Awesome giveaway that we're doing for you guys who have been loyal subscribers to us. So make sure that you guys get in on that. Subscribe to the channel. That's all you need to do to be eligible, and we will make that happen. Also, feel free to like the video, comment on it. Let me know what I get right, what I get wrong. We've had some pretty solid weeks here, even though these are contrarian plays. These are not my building blocks like the article that I write up every week, which will be back this week. But these are kind of plays that I like to kind of get leverage on the field with and in some spots where I'm going to be already targeting. And so without any further ado, I guess let's get into it. And this is a play, I guess it's catching some steam within the fantasy community or DFS community. I'm not really sure where people will land on this, but I always start at quarterback, and that is going to be with Sam Darnold at the quarterback position. And now I know this sounds gross. It's Sam Darnold. It's the Jets. How can we trust this team? They're blowing, leads that they for sure have. And the defense isn't playing any defense. It gets the coordinator fired. But we're looking at this scenario here. And I mean, it doesn't feel comfortable to talk about, but what it does is he's 5,100 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. I don't think you even consider him on FanDuel at that price tag when we know that pricing is soft there and what we could do at the quarterback position. But on DraftKings, when we're talking about him at 5,100, Frank Gore's questionable. He wasn't in Adam Schefter's report on Saturday night that he was officially going to be ruled out, so probably a true game time decision. But he could end up missing with Ty Johnson being the lead starter there. Jamison Crowder also could end up missing this game as well, too, leaving guys like Brashard Perryman, Braxton Berrios, Jeff Smith, Vincent Smith, Chris Herndon to be the guys that Darnold is throwing to. And while that doesn't all sound enticing, what we do know is the matchup is great, has been great for quarterbacks. They've allowed the Seattle defense has allowed the most yards, completions, and attempts to the quarterback position. We know that if Seattle is letting Russ cook, which a lot of people are high on Russ this week, I myself will probably have a Russ team, if not multiple, in multi-inter builds. And this is a multi-inter play for Sam Darnold. I'm not touting him to be your main build around. I'm not touting him for anything like that. But if you think that DK Metcalf is the play this week, if you think that Tyler Lockett is the play, if you think that Russ Wilson is the play, then that game script should then lead to Sam Darnold kind of, making things happen on the other side. Because if the Jets just come up and show up dead, this is probably looking to be like a Chris Carson game, or just a game that the Seattle Seahawks want to, just go in, come out with a W after they just lost to the Giants, not trying to lose to both New York teams on back-to-back weeks. And so if you feel that way, then I would temper your expectations on the Seattle side just in general. But if you think this game, is going to have points from the Seattle side, forcing Darnold to throw, I mean, we know the attempts have been there for Darnold. Usually that's what happens. They were in a weird game script where they were able to take control of the Raiders in that game, kind of let them back in. But he's cheap. The volume will be there. I mean, he's consistently, kind of gotten around that 15, 16 point range there on DraftKings, which at his salary this week would get you 3x. And if he gets to 20 points, you're already looking at close to 4x there at his price tag on DraftKings. Pair him with Brashard Perryman, bring it back with either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett there. I love that kind of game stack to get leverage on the field, and nobody, at least coming into this, it sounded like nobody was on it. Maybe it'll catch a little bit of steam to get some exposure to it, but it's going overlooked, and it could, get you a nice shot at taking down the tournament. Let's get into running back. That's really my only quarterback option there. I usually have multiples. I will write up Herbert in the building blocks. I think just the way that the slate kind of presents itself, I really do trust Herbert at home to kind of have a bounce back spot there against Atlanta, another team that you're able to target quarterbacks against. His price tag is really just doesn't make sense on DraftKings at 6,800 there. So he'll be my favorite guy there. And I also have exposure to guys like Rodgers, Russ, Mahomes, Brady even this week. But let's get into running back here, sticking on the contrarian plays. And let's talk about DeAndre Swift. He's coming in at 6,500 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. Very appetizing price tag that he has there. And this comes down to the tale is as old as time. He's coming off of a concussion injury. We know that it's kind of scary to hear guys like Adrian Peterson talk about he wasn't looking like himself 2 weeks ago. But with these concussion injuries, and while, it is unfortunate that they do happen, they always tend to lead people to be off of them in a DFS scenario. And we talk about this on the DJ Nation pod. I've talked about this at length with one of my buddies, Ben Cummins, in the industry as well. And it just if we're getting a guy who can see 20 touches and was seeing 20 touches before the injury at low ownership at a very appetizing price tag, especially on DraftKings if he has pass catching role here. In a good matchup, Packers D, one we've attacked running backs all year with, allowing 11 running back rushing touchdowns. They also allow the second most receiving yards and touchdowns to opposing backs, third most DK and FanDuel points. I mean, everything is jumping off of the page to kind of attack DeAndre Swift in this game. And you love kind of the games stack and scenario that you can talk yourself into where you're taking DeAndre Swift and you're able to pay for Aaron Rodgers and Adams and maybe like Tanyan or an MVS on the other side, because if Swift is hitting, that means that Aaron Rodgers is going to need to do more or will be forced to play pass more. So love DeAndre Swift this week. Let's talk about Ronald Jones at running back as well. He's 6,100 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. And this is a leverage spot for me. He has big upside here as a home favorite. In the games where Tampa Bay has been able to control, he has put up good numbers, over 20 DraftKings points. And you do worry about the red zone role there. Fournette has actually, he's only had 2 games where he's had more red zone attempts than Fournette. That was week 3 when they won by 18 against Denver. And then week 10 when they won by 23 against Carolina. He had that bonanza run against Carolina there for whatever it was, 70, 80, 90 yards. I can't remember off the top of my head now, and I didn't have it written down here for you guys, but he did have that big run there. And so when in games that they can control, he's been, doing really well. There's 6.5 point favorites here against Minnesota. I do love the Minnesota passing side, and I'll talk about Justin Jefferson again in the Building Blocks article. I think he's a phenomenal play this week as the way that you attack Tampa Bay is through the air. And if they can somehow take control of this game, I think that Ronald Jones could find himself in a favorable script there if the Tampa D somehow shows up. So he's going to garner no ownership this week, but that game total's high. The team implied total is high. And so I love getting some exposure to him as a leverage play. Jonathan Taylor comes in at the last running back for me, 5,800 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. Nobody wants to play this guy because it's guesswork, right? We talked about this on the DJ Nation pod as well, too. Like, is Jordan Wilkins going to be the guy that Frank Reich tries to land on if Jonathan Taylor doesn't get going? Is Naheem Hines going to get more of the work? Jonathan Taylor, he's only seeing, just above 50% of the snap share here from the running back position. And that's not usually one that we like to target, but this matchup is so incredible against the Raiders, the 5th most fantasy points allowed to running backs. Hopefully they're able to get Jonathan Taylor going here. And he's just so mispriced now, especially when you're talking about a guy like Myles Gaskin, who's been off of the field now. He's on the COVID list. So where are pivots going to go to? Are people going to think about going to Jonathan Taylor? Are they just going to drop down all the way to a J.D. McKissick? Are they going to drop down to Melvin Gordon? Are they going to try and find ways to get up to an Austin Eckler or somebody else in the 6K range? I just think he will definitely go overlooked because people feel like they can't trust him. And that's going to lead to his ownership being low. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has, over a 20-point game here because the matchup's so favorable. Talk about somebody else that people I don't think they can trust is Keenan Allen. He comes in at 7,700 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. Really love this play. on the DraftKings standpoint, when you're talking about PPR, I think I love Herbert this week. And if Herbert is getting going, you got to think that he's going to bring Keenan Allen along with him, the most targeted wide receiver in the league there, has the most receptions in the league. In Atlanta, this defense, outside of AJ Terrell, the rookie, who's kind of been the standout for him, guys like, I really am not sold on Denard, not sold on Isaiah Oliver. He's been terrible. The secondary has just been, not really good at limiting production to opposing wide receivers, giving up the second most DK points, third most FanDuel points to wide receivers. And we love that Keenan Allen does have a red zone role on this team, 22% of the team's red zone targets. So if I love Herbert, definitely have to have some exposure to Keenan Allen this week. And even, like in cash builds, I think that you can trust Keenan Allen at that price tag if you're not really sold on maybe paying $9,000 for a guy like Devontae Adams. Another guy who people might not be sold on is Allen Robinson, who's 6,800 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. Just a fantastic play, I think, across the board when you're looking at Mitchell Trubisky now being quarterback. I don't think the numbers have been dove into enough with the difference that Trubisky makes over the difference that Foles had on him. And he's seen 12 targets per game on average over the past 12 games that he's played in with Mitchell Trubisky. As a 27% target share of the targets this year with Mitchell Trubisky as at quarterback. We're looking at, a Houston team that's going to be rolling out Vernon Hargreaves and Phillip Gaines and Eric Murray to try and stop this guy. No Bradley Roby because he's suspended with the PEDs. And wide receivers against Houston have been going ham against them. I mean, T.Y. Hilton came alive for 20-something or close to 20-something DK points. Adams torched them for 44. Chark torched them for 27.9. So, this game script, we don't know how it's going to go. On the other side, Brandon Cooks could be missing. Kiki Kuti could be missing. We know there's no Will Fuller for Deshaun. It's going to be a cold game. So even with that being said, which I think I'm just getting a notification here that Brandon Cooks is expected to play along with Kiki Kuti. So that definitely helps the game environment there. But even so, this is the best way for Mitchell and the Bears to move the ball is by getting the ball to Allen Robinson. Love him as a leverage play this week at wide receiver. Let's talk about another leverage play here at the wide receiver position, and that's Antonio Brown. 5,500 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. We got into a heated discussion. I don't want to say heated, but we got into a discussion about Antonio Brown today, actually, as I'm recording this on Saturday, just about what the play means and what his upside is and things of that nature here. What it comes down to me for Antonio Brown is, yes, it is name recognition, right? Like you are paying for Antonio Brown because he is Antonio Brown. Like that name carries some weight, and he's 5,500. That we're not talking about a guy who's in the 6K range, kind of awkwardly priced, not 7K range where you kind of feel like he's overpriced. But if some of these games had gone a little bit differently with the targets that he was seeing, which was 26 targets he was seeing going into that Chiefs game where he kind of disappointed there, but who hasn't disappointed at wide receiver against the Chiefs? That's kind of been their MO all year. And if those games kind of broke differently, we'd be having a different conversation here because instead of, 17 points, 15 points, what he's garnering on DraftKings without hitting the 100-yard bonus and not scoring a touchdown, he would have been, possibly getting touchdowns and maybe hitting 25, 30 points there. And so they've had the bye weeks to kind of get things right. Evans and Godwin have been banged up. He's a guy that it just scares me to fade him this week when you're talking about a Minnesota team here who has a lot of production to wide receivers, and the red zone role is absolutely just crucial for Evans here. I think over the past 3 weeks, he's seen 9 red zone targets. And then the next closest was Gronk, I believe, with 3 or 4. I'd have to go back and check those numbers. But regardless, he's leaps and bounds the red zone target for Brady when they get down there, if they're not going to run the football. And so Brown only has 1 target over the course of the past 3 weeks. Godwin only has 2 or 3 himself. So both of those guys don't really have a red zone role, so to speak. It's really Evans. But if Brown could get going here, love his price. Tim Patrick is a guy I want to talk about too. He's 4,200 on DraftKings. And actually, I'm going to talk about Tim Patrick and Colin Johnson kind of in the same breath because these guys are both cheap. And I want to make sure I hit on this before I go over time. But Tim Patrick, he's been absolutely outstanding. 60 yards that he has been hitting consistently in games that he's playing with Drew Drew Lock. Jerry Jeudy is the guy who's carrying the air yards there, but it really has been Tim Patrick who's been consistent. And at 4,200 here against this Carolina team, it just is too cheap. The Carolina has been allowing the third most points to outside receivers. Patrick runs 80% of his routes on the outside. You really don't have to think too much about it. I love Tim Patrick for cash. I also think he's in play for GPPs as a cheap option that kind of people will just overlook because this game isn't sexy enough. And then another guy, Colin Johnson, where the game is kind of sexy. The Tennessee Titans, it's absolutely insane. The games that they're in are going like 57 points on average is what those games are scoring. So like, even though this is Mike Glennon on the other side, and Mike Glennon's another guy I've seen catching some steam across the industry. Again, a cheap stack that you can kind of make sense of with Chark's kind of in a good spot. Colin Johnson, again, in a good spot. Maybe it's a cheap way that you can kind of fall into fantasy production points and kind of get guys around you. But I talk about Colin Johnson because he does seem to have a rapport with Mike Glennon here. First game, 96 and 1 on 8 targets. Second game, 4 for 66 on 6 targets. You just love to see that he ran a pass route 88, almost 89% of the time in that first game, and then 62% in the second time. I just think, if you're going to be playing like Ryan Tannehill teams and you need like a run back option, and maybe you're not falling on James Robinson, or even if you are and you just want to take this game environment as a whole. I mean, this game environment is jumping off the page as points will be scored here. And so taking a guy like Colin Johnson, who's 3,600 on DraftKings, I don't think you need to do it on FanDuel. It doesn't make sense. I'd actually prefer Chark there on FanDuel because I think he has just a higher upside to what he offers you. But Colin Johnson on DK at the price tag in those game stacks there with the Tennessee Titans, I think makes a ton of sense. And then, as I'm long-winded as always, I'm just going to round this out here with Hunter Henry as my last guy. Hunter Henry comes in at 4,400 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. And really, the tight end position has been gross all year. We do get Kelsey back on the slate again, which is nice, but can you pay the 7,400 on DraftKings that he's going to be, 8,000 something on FanDuel that he's going to be, and really feel confident in your teams if they don't have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, to kind of get all the equity there? I don't know if that is going to pay off. And I think people are looking at what Darren Waller did last week, in what was a decent matchup for him, and just going absolutely bananas. And they're like, man, I can't miss out on that 40-point game. And sure, Kelsey, I think 20 points is a lock. I don't really think that, this guy will go out there against Miami, even in limited passing from Mahomes. Like, he's just been falling into 20 points across the board. But is 20 points going to be enough for what you're paying for at his salary? You're really paying for what you hope that, Waller got, or what you hope that Kelsey can get if he gets a multiple touchdown game going for like 120 yards receiving on 8 catches or something like that. So a guy like Hunter Henry, where you're talking about, he's 6+ targets in 9 of 11 games before last week, has a really safe floor. Atlanta's allowing the second most touchdowns to the tight end position, has really been got by the tight end position, so to speak, over the years. So Hunter Henry, especially, I love Justin Herbert this week. I love getting to a Hunter Henry guy at 4,400. That's just so you're talking about 3,000 less on DraftKings in salary there, close to 3,000 less on FanDuel at 5,600. He just gives you, such a nice spot to come through. But I would, encourage people to try and pay down if you can at tight end, because a lot of people will be paying up, and just by paying down or taking an option there who's going under the radar will give you that much more leverage on the field that have Kelsey. So that's going to do it. Long-winded this week, I know, but wanted to make sure I hit on those plays for you guys. The Week 14 TFA DFS top low owned plays. Appreciate you guys rocking with me all year. Like I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You do not want to miss out on the giveaway that we're doing, the Allen Robinson jersey that we are giving away on December 27th. We love it. We love everybody who's been rocking with us. Thanks so much for the support. I will see you guys back next week for the Week 15 DFS top low owned plays. Until then, I hope to see you guys on the leaderboard. Go get that money. Peace.